Hey guys, what's going on? It's BJ here to talk a little bit about a situation that um, we talked about a little while back. When it first happened back in 2023, in April of 2023, and we haven't really touched on it since. Even though we talk a lot on this channel about conflicts that arise in the Middle East and North Africa. Probably my favorite topic other than professional wrestling to talk about. And that is the genocide slash civil war in Sudan. Now, what's sparking this is the fall of Al Fashir, which was a basic stronghold of the current government, the Furqan government um, in Sudan, and the taking over by the RSF, the Rapid Security Force, and the mass genocide that is going on as a result of that. So, and the role that the UAE is playing in this, the UAE, of course, being the United Arab Emirates, whose most famous city is Dubai, the destination of many Western tourists, the darling of many in the West, especially influencers here on social media. They love to talk about going to Dubai, engaging with Dubai, vacationing in Dubai, buying expensive Dubai chocolates, buying expensive Dubai gold. But that comes with a price. And the price is the millions of lives lost by individuals in Sudan. Now, what is the role that they play in this conflict? First of all, what is the conflict? Basically, you have two factions. You have the current leader, who is Al Farquan. Uh, he is the current head of state of Sudan. And you have Hameti, who is his opposition. Now, these two gentlemen were once allies of one another up until violence broke out between them in 2023. Together, these two gentlemen overthrew two different governments of Sudan in the last 5 years, actually. The government of Omar al Bashir, who maintained a dictatorship for several decades in Sudan, and the government of Abdul Hamdak, which was in power in the early 2020s. But then they fractured. Then Hameti started to, his faction, his RSF forces rebelled against um, Burkwan. Let me make sure I'm pronouncing his name right. Hold on. Yeah, Burhan. He rebelled against Burhan Hamedi's forces, and Hamedi's forces and Burhan's forces have been going at it for the last 2 years, and this is basically a genocide. But how did Hamed? What is a UAE? How does UAE factor into this? Well, in the Darfur region, which is the Western Sudan, there have been several gold deposits discovered, and Hamedi has been getting rich. His side has been getting rich off of trading gold with the UAE, United Arab Emirates, and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And also, that gold has been funding the genocide and the civil war in Yemen. We talked before about um, the civil war in Yemen and what that is. Basically, it's Saudi Arabia backing one faction in Yemen and Iran backing another faction, the Houthis in Yemen, the rebels of the Yemen government, uh, or they're Shias, right? They're Shia Muslims, They are backed by Iran, and the governmental forces are backed by Saudi Arabia and the other Arab Gulf countries. Well, that's similar here. They're trading in gold and they're enriching the RSF forces. Now, what are the RSF forces? The RSF was a special militia group appointed originally in 2013 by the old dictator Omar al-Bashir. And before that, during the initial conflict in the early 2000s, um, they were known as the Janjaweed, and they were basically Arab militiamen who would go around terrorizing native black Africans. Because in the 1980s, there was a famine a famine and a drought in the Sahel, which is basically a desert-like uh, area between the savannah and northern Africa. And these Arab tribes that had originally inhabited this area were forced to move into um, parts that were more settled by pastoralist Africans. And naturally, being that there's a scarcity of resources, there developed conflicts between the Arab tribes and the native Africans. But the way Sudan was set up by the British when they left in 1955, they had the Arab tribes, they put the Arab tribes in charge. So it was basically like a move of Arab supremacy. They were expanding their territory. They moved into the territory of the settled pastoralist Africans, and they started um, to genocide them. But the government in the central part in Khartoum was on their side. And these Janjaweed, these militias, they were basically outlaws. They were vigilant. They were a vigilante group. They were an equivalent to, say, the Ku Klux Klan here in the United States, with their racialist, Arab supremacist attitudes towards Africans. Because during this time also was the Sudanese civil war that had gone on since the 1980s between the north of Sudan, which is predominantly Arab, and the south of Sudan, which is predominantly, which is today South Sudan, since 2011, predominantly Black African. So of course, the government in Sudan was becoming more racialist, and of course, there were elements of that government that originally they were outlaws, but then they became entrenched within the government of Omar al-Bashir that were more racialist and more Arab supremacist. So he then in 2013, he, being Omar al-Bashir, the old dictator, he then codified them and he made them an official part of the government, and Hameti was his guy. And meanwhile, he's trading gold with Saudi Arabia and the UAE, because Saudi Arabia and the UAE are trying to diversify their economy and move their economy away from oil and towards other things. And one of the things is gold. So they're trading gold with each other. And this guy, Hameti, is becoming increasingly richer and richer and more powerful as a tribal boss. So the people of Sudan start to have a problem after the Arab Spring and how that affected them, and this whole surge of freedom in the Arab world. They decide they're going to he who used to be Omar al-Bashir's right hand man, who Omar al-Bashir called his protector. He decides he's going to overthrow this guy, and he's going to become the boss. This guy Hemeti, right? He decides he's going to become the boss. So he collaborates with Barkhan, right? He collaborates with Barkhan. Those two overthrow Omar al-Bashir. Then they overthrow Abdullah Hamdok, right? Again in another coup. But then they turn on each other, and it starts to bifurcate into the old ethnic lines. Those old ethnic tensions start to boil up once again. but this time he's deeper. He's deeper in the trade with the UAE and Saudi Arabia. He's already solidified his alliance with Saudi Arabia and the UAE as they become more powerful, as they, especially the UAE, through the Abraham Accords, right? The Abraham Accords, which Trump signed in 2020. Basically, the Sudanese government under Hamdok at that time um, normalized relations with Israel. The UAE normalized relations with Israel. Saudi Arabia did not, but there was talk during the Biden administration that they were going to do that. So these Gulf nations are becoming more powerful, and Sudan's central government, which it looks like Hemeti is going to, after the civil war is over, Hemeti is going to take it over, and he's going to basically resume business as usual with the Arab policy of expansion and the Arabization into more African territories, which is genocide. You know what I mean? The UAE is sponsoring and Saudi Arabia with their gold trade into this group in Sudan is sponsoring basically an Arab genocide against Black Africans. So basically, what it is a counter revolution, right? The the Arab tribes and the non-Arab tribes formed a coalition in 2019 to the overthrow of Omar al-Bashir. But now that coalition has broken up, and now we're back to ethnic tensions. But the Arab side has the upper hand in this case because the non-Arab side doesn't have the backing of a powerful Arab coalition in the same way that the Arab side has. So the RSF, which is the Arab side, has the backing of UAE and Saudi Arabia, and the other side, which is the Sudanese government, it's not led by Burhan anymore because he's in exile. You have a guy named Malik Angar who is leading it. So a lot of people are pissed, calling on the leaders of the UAE. And like I said, the UAE is basically the darling of the Western world. When it comes to tourism in the Arab world, this is the place. This is the place where all the tourists go. You know what I mean? Where the tourists flock to is the UAE, is Dubai, Dubai in particular, and sometimes Abu Dhabi. So uh, you know, and it's just a shame because this thing has been going on for as long as the Palestinian and the Ukrainian situation. But the Ukrainian situation has gone on a year before that. But this thing has been going on, just as much, and it's not had gotten the kind of attention that the Palestinian situation has gotten. Now, granted, Sudan is not as important to Western consciousness as Israel or Jerusalem or Hebron or any of those places in the Levant, because of it doesn't have any connection to the Bible. But I think there is another dimension besides out and out anti-Semitism, which people want to just find a way to blame the Jews, so they focus on Zionist aggression to the Palestinians. But also, Palestinians are lighter skinned, Palestinians are Arabs, and these are Africans, being genocided, and Africans matter less. Again, we go back to the central theme of what does Black Lives Matter mean globally, not just Black Lives Matter in terms of police brutality against foundational Black Americans, but Black Lives Matter in terms of the globe. You know what I mean? And I spoke about this when there were bombings in Tanzania and Kenya, the Kenyan Mall by Al Shabaab, which is a Somali jihadist group, back in the 2010s, or when Boko Haram was running roughshod in Nigeria against Christians, which they still are doing, by the way. I said, they don't matter as much, they don't gain as much attention as ISIS's attacks on Paris, or ISIS's attacks in Cologne in Germany, or ISIS's attacks ISIS or Al Qaeda attacks in London, or the United States or anywhere else, because they're not white. They're Black Africans, and Black Africans, unfortunately, in the Western consciousness and including in Middle Eastern consciousness, matter less. Their lives don't matter. And this is why genocides in Sudan or genocides in the Congo seem to matter less in the Western consciousness. One of the reasons why. People are quick to point to situations in Palestine or Ukraine, but quick to overlook situations in the Congo and Sudan. And that's just sad and unfortunate. But anyway, guys, we pray for the Sudan. We pray also for the Congo, and we pray for the victims of Hurricane Melissa in Jamaica. Don't forget to like, comment, and in the United States. New York was completely flooded out, and an accessorized van was riding through the water. In the middle of Brooklyn. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell button to see when my next video is coming out. Love you guys.